Okay, good morning. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Mark Bishel, Vice Chair of the Board. I'll now ask my fellow trustees to do a roll call, starting with our newest trustee, Millie Makajani.
Millie Makajani, present.
Dominic Macchia, present.
Lorraine Harris.
Elkin Abramowitz.
Mark Fishel.
Shelley Cohen.
Al Cockfield.
Valerie Anderson Campbell. Nancy Goroth.
Thank you. And I know for the record, not only do we have a quorum, but we have 9 trustees for the first time in a while. So welcome to our new trustees. It's great to have you. My remarks are the first item on the agenda. Today's meeting of the board is notable as we're joined by our newest trustees, Dominic Macchia and Millie Makajani. Both are qualified individuals with experience and perspectives which will be very valuable to this board and the 1.2 million customers we represent. On behalf of my colleagues here on the board, I'd like to welcome you both and look forward to working with you and providing excellent service to Long Island and the Rockaways.
Thank you.
I'd be remiss if I didn't mention our former colleague, Drew Biondo, who was always focused on delivering results and accountability for our customer and his role on the board. We thank Drew for his years of service to LIPA and wish him well in his future. In just a few minutes, we'll be formally honoring Drew for his time as a LIPA trustee, and I should note that Drew never missed a board meeting, a perfect attendance record. Another item on today's agenda is the vote to approve a new standard time of day rate throughout LIPA service territory. This new rate structure is designed to reduce carbon emission and provide customers with the opportunity to save money by shifting a portion of their energy usage to cheaper off-peak hours. If adopted, LIPA will be the first utility in the state to offer the time of day as its standard offering for residential customers. As always, LIPA's Board of Trustees invites members of the public to either submit written comments or sign up to speak during the meeting. Any comments submitted to board agenda comments at lipower.org, a very catchy title, Bobby, before or during the meeting will be made part of the public record. Any comments received after the meeting will be distributed to trustees in writing. If you've registered to speak in a particular agenda item, we will call you at the appropriate time. Please keep your remarks to 3 minutes. We'll now move on to consideration of adoption of the consent agenda. As with all items on this agenda for this board meeting, briefing materials and draft resolutions for each item on the agenda were provided to trustees ahead of time and were made available to the public on LIPA's website. If at any time a trustee would like an item removed from the consent agenda, they simply make the request and the item will be moved to the regular agenda, at which time it will be presented in detail by staff before consideration by the trustees. With that, I'll ask LIPA's General Counsel Bobby O'Connor to list the items included on today's agenda.
Thank you, trustees. This morning, you take up consideration of the adoption of the minutes from the February 15th meeting, the approval of the 2022 investment report, and the 2023 board policy on investments, the approval of the power purchase agreement extension for Hawkeye Greenport, the approval of the annual financial package, the authorizations to extend certain letters of credit, the approval of the 5-year strategic roadmap, and the amendments to the board policy on procurement, all of which have been previously briefed fully to the board.
Thank you. Do any of the trustees wish to know item removed from the agenda? Okay, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any abstention or opposition? Okay, the motion carries. Before moving to the regular agenda, our first item is the consideration of a resolution honoring the service of our former trustee, Drew Biondo. I'd like to read the resolution to be considered by our board. Whereas trustee Drew Biondo has a distinguished career in education and state and local government, and whereas trustee Biondo was appointed to the LIPA Board of Trustees in January of 2018 during a critical time for New York State's transition to a carbon-free electric grid and during a period of significant investment in the reliability and resiliency of the Long Island electrical grid, and was an advocate for these efforts during his service on the LIPA board. And whereas trustee Biondo was a fierce advocate for LIPA's customers during his service on the board and epitomized LIPA's purpose as a value-driven organization that puts our customers first in all our actions. And whereas trustee Biondo used his government and education background to play a leading role on the board after Tropical Storm Isaias to ensure that our customers received and will continue to receive the high level of service and dedication they deserve. And whereas trustee Biondo diligently served the customers of Long Island and the Rockaways during his tenure on the LIPA board and was a vocal proponent for a smarter, cleaner, and more affordable electric grid. Now, therefore, let it be resolved that the Board of Trustees hereby duly recognizes the friendship and faithful service of trustee Drew Biondo. Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
The motion carries. Okay, thank you. We're going to start off with the Consideration of approval of the annual report and amendment to the board's policy on diversity, equity, and inclusion. This item will be presented by Bobby O'Connor. Bobby, the floor is yours.
Thank you again, trustees. As you know, we have been considering this board policy for quite a bit of time. The board formed a working group to work with our consultant leading resources, Eric Douglas, several months ago. The policy has come back to the board several times. In February, notably, we received some public comment that after the board considered and discussed, thought warranted taking the policy back to that working group for further consideration of the public comments as well as some additional thoughts from the board. And so that working group did meet after the February board meeting. The working group is Trustee Anderson Campbell, Trustee Cohen, Trustee Fischel, and we had the pleasure of welcoming Trustee Goroff, who was very vocal in the February meeting. No good deed goes unpunished. And our newest trustee, Trustee Macchiajani, who has extensive experience in this area. So I participated in that discussion. It was an excellent discussion, I would say. And a couple of key takeaways that are now reflected in the board policy for consideration today. First and foremost, the biggest comment I think we received was that there was some concern we were blending traits that are legally protected with traits that are well worth valuing but fall into a different category. And so after consideration, the policy as revised today makes a distinction between those two categories. It still values both, but it avoids some potential confusion, I would say. Some of the other feedback that we received was that perhaps we could include more data in the report to the board on compliance with this policy. And so we'll see in the revised report, one of the things we highlighted, our employee and engagement survey, which we do annually, contains 8 questions that are very specifically driven towards getting a sense of how our employee workforce feels about our efforts on diversity, equity, inclusion. Questions that get to whether they feel valued, respected, whether they feel that their diversity and different thoughts are embraced. And so we included details on that in the reformed annual report, and we will continue to report back to the board on that. The other thing we did, we, as you know, have minority and women business enterprise targets for all of our contracting. That comes down from the state. We added a statement in the policy reporting on our results there. LIPA has routinely surpassed the 30% target there, and we have received an A+ grade on that for the past several years. So kudos to our procurement group on that, and PSEG also does an excellent job with that. And then finally, we enhanced some of the discussion of what we've been doing on the social justice front, including grants to the Shinnecock Nation to try to enhance their knowledge of our LMI programs that they may be eligible for, and the bill forgiveness program, of course, that came to this board earlier this year for COVID arrears that had built up. And so with that, I would suggest to you that the board has been responsive to public comments. If there's any additional thoughts on the policy or the report, I'm happy to discuss them. Otherwise, we would ask for a vote at this time.
Trustees, any questions? Bobby, is anybody signed up from the public to discuss this?
No.
Okay, do I have a motion for approval?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any abstention or opposition? Okay, the motion carries. Thank you very much. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the ISAIS Task Force Outage Management System Independent Verification and Validation Testing Update. To be presented by LIPA's Chief Operating Officer, Mujib Lodi.
Thank you, Trustee Fisher. Again, as you know, it's been a 30-month, our OMS system as well as telephony system failed. Last year, PSEG Long Island redeployed the OMS system to the latest version, and LIPA kicked off its independent IBNB process itself. And we had made, since last report to the board in February, we have made some progress on the functional testing, and we have not made much progress on the performance testing. So Osman Ahmed, who is lead, our IBNB, will be providing a very high-level brief to the board. Osman, please.
Yes, thank you, Mujib. Good afternoon, trustees. So just a quick summary. We are down to the finishing post on the functional testing. We have about 12 tests remaining on these, and I must admit that most of these tests are really waiting for PSEG Long Island to either make test facilities available or revise the test because the previous test did not pass. So, but anyway, in any case, we're down to about 12 tests that are failing to run, and we were still optimistic that this will be done definitely by the next board report, failing any other difficulties presented by PSEG Long Island. So that's the latest on the functional test. If you can go to the next slide. Okay, so I think Mujib made the point that we are still waiting for PSEG Long Island to make the test conditions available for the performance test, as we discussed last time, that we are trying to replicate the issues that or the conditions of the test that led to some unexpected results in one of the performance tests. So we're waiting for that, and hopefully, they've told us that in April they will make the tests available for us, and so we're waiting. We'll let you know at that point. At this point, we have nothing else to add on the performance test. Any questions, trustees?
Trustees, any questions? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Osman.
Mujib, is that it?
That's it.
Okay, thank you. Next on the agenda is the CEO report, presented fittingly by our CEO. Tom?
Hello, trustees. How are you? So it's a lot of items, 9 items, but they'll go quick. So stick with me. So first, agenda items. For those who are just tuning in, we in various committee meetings, we covered PSEG Energy Resources and Trade, their performance last year, an update on the low and moderate income heat pump program, PSEG's operating report, internal audit activities, my performance evaluation. We discussed the strategic planning roadmaps for the next 5 years, which were also discussed at the last board meeting. We met with the independent auditors, and they gave us a clean bill of health on the financial statements. We talked briefly about a 55 megawatt extension of a power plant on the North Fork. Coming up right now, we'll have time of day rates. We have and 3 board policy reports, which will be later in the agenda. If we go to the next page. So I want to welcome our new trustees, Dom Macchia and Millie Makajani. What a wonderful thing. We have 2 great new appointments from Senate Majority Leader Andrea Stewart-Cousins. Also, of course, want to thank them for their service to their community and their volunteerism here. And also want to thank, as I know you just did, but on behalf of staff, to Trustee Drew Biondo, which served with us for about 5 years and is a dedicated and wonderful public servant. So really want to thank our new trustees and and Trustee Biondo, who is a good friend to us all, and really put his heart into serving for customers. Speaking of thank yous, we need to thank our board vice chairman here, who joined us in Washington, D.C. to discuss with our congressional delegation support for clean energy grants and storm restoration grants and storm hardening grants. As you know, we depend and greatly utilize federal grants to help reduce customer bills. So this is kind of a business strategy for us. So we really appreciate Trustee Fischel joining us last month. You got him to wear a tie. We did, which is it's the first time I've seen him in a tie in many years. Many years.
Looks good.
He looks nice in a tie. He still remembers how to tie it. Next page. Also, just as an update, we are joining with about 30 other utilities and the Electric Power Research Institute, which is kind of the research institute for electric utilities, in an effort jointly to develop a common framework to evaluate climate vulnerability. And so this is going to go out over the next 2 to 3 years. We have an ongoing climate study, but just wanted you to know that I know this is a very important topic for the board, that we are collaborating with others to make sure we have best practices and contributing to that research, as is PSEG also participating in this initiative. So, next page. If you're at the MoMA, keep your eyes peeled for our Jones Beach Energy and Nature Center, which when we opened it, I did promise to you it was the prettiest energy and nature center in the entire world and the best, prettiest location that any utility ever put in an energy and nature center. But if you're at the MoMA, it is being exhibited there, and if you're not at the MoMA, maybe you should go. Until July 29th. Next up. Speaking of federal grants, the great Department of Energy. There were some new federal grant opportunities from the Department of Energy that came in with with two bills last year, the Inflation Reduction Act and also the Infrastructure and Jobs Act. And last month we talked to you about a grant that we had applied for. And here's another one where we're jointly partnering with the great Stony Brook, a local institution, to partner with them on a grant opportunity to take some of the goals in our strategic roadmap, and they will do certain research that complements those particular goals. And that research could be worth up to $20 million, which helps reduce rates for our customers and improves the benefits and outcomes. So we'll see if we win the grant. This is not a grant that's won, but want to let you know we're continuing to pursue all opportunities. We're also pursuing a $400 million storm hardening grant. And as mentioned last month, we're pursuing a $250 million grant to increase substation hosting capacity for distributed energy resources. So just keep looking for grant opportunities, ways to improve the grid without cost to our customers. Next page. Another thing worth noting, solar installations on the rise, and really a record year. You see 2015 and 16 where there was some leasing activity that was, I would submit, perhaps unsustainable. So I think those were somewhat anomaly years. But otherwise, you see an ever-increasing trend, and installations were up about 19%. And that's compared to a 16% decrease nationwide. So not only bucking the trend, but bucking it quite significantly. And for our share of the state's solar goal of 10,000 megawatts of solar by 2030, we're likely to achieve it about 5 years early. So continue to see great progress here. Next up. So this is another one that we've talked to you about a good bit, because if you're talking about offshore wind, you're also talking about transmission. And it was my pleasure to appear on a program just yesterday with Newsday Live talking about offshore wind on Long Island. And this is one of the topics we talked about. But we have and will have more offshore wind landing on Long Island than we can use. We are kind of a conduit to get that offshore wind to the rest of New York State. And it won't all land here, but a disproportionate share will land here. And so we had done a study, as you'll recall, back in 2019, 2020, jointly with Con Ed, looking at interconnection locations. There are now 3 awarded projects. Those are the green arrows. The proposed project is the blue arrow. It's basically an export cable. How do you get it off Long Island to help serve others? And we determined that we would need at least one export cable under any circumstances, and probably more than one, and filed that with the Public Service Commission, who agreed. The New York Independent System Operator is the entity that is running the bid process. 19 proposals were received from 4 developers. 16 of the 19 met their minimum requirements. And this is a post on where we are with the idea that the project will be selected by the end of 2023 and in service by the end of 2030. As you'll recall, through some fine work, we also assured that our customers will pay our load share ratio of this export cable, because this really isn't to meet our needs, it's to meet the rest of the state. But if you go to the next page, this is a preliminary report, a final, this gives some detail, but a report on the actual project selection and the benefits of these 16 alternative programs is expected in the second quarter. The selection criteria NYSO will use is listed on the page. Part of it is cost, part of it is efficiency, how much offshore wind it, quote, unbottles. Cost, those projects ranged from $2 to $17 billion. The $17 billion is a very large upgrade. The average projects, probably more 2 to 3. Most of the projects fall in that load. The study revealed, which we kind of already knew, that at present, without the export cable, about 3 terawatt hours a year, equivalent to about 15% of Long Island's load, could not be used on Long Island with the offshore wind already set to land here, let alone the stuff that will land in the future. And these projects would reduce, and that's called curtailment. So what that means is even though the wind can produce, we can't take it. So you just kind of shut down the turbines and you don't accept the wind, even though you've built the project. And so these proposed projects would reduce that curtailment anywhere from 37 to 93%. And those projects have different ranges of benefits as detailed in the report. So obviously the $17 billion project has more upgradability and other benefits versus the 2 to 3. But this selection is in the hands of the NYISO, but we are participating, closely monitoring, and we'll keep you apprised because these are big transmission upgrades right here on Long Island. Next up. And finally, just a note, yes, a thank you to the great Jen Han, who does wonderful work for LIPA and its customers, but in addition has been recognized by the Herald Community newspapers as among the premier businesswomen of Long Island. So just a notable congratulations to her and recognition that she not only does a great job for us, but I think others have noted it as well. So thank you so much, Jen. And I believe that's the end of the report. So I'll just take your questions.
Trustees, any questions?
I just have one question, Tom. Could you just elaborate a little bit for me on the export cable? Who's paying for it?
So the facility will be built, but that facility will ultimately pay our load share ratio, which is a kind of a term of art. It means our share of the electric grid load compared to everybody else, so we'll pay about 12.5%. Now, typically, or more typically, what happens is when investment upgrades occur, they're paid for by the local utility. But in this case, we made the case that this is really about meeting a statewide goal, and so we're happy to chip into the common pot to meet the statewide goal, but we shouldn't be bearing all of the costs when the real primary purpose of the cable is to meet a statewide goal. This probably won't be the last transmission upgrades we need to make, especially because this only really evaluated the first 9,000 megawatts of offshore wind, but projections are we could need up to 18,000 megawatts or more of offshore wind for the state to reach its 2040 goal of zero carbon electric grid. How much of that will come here or go elsewhere is really up to the developers. So the way this works is that the federal government leases these sites and people bid on them, and then they have the right to develop them. And then NYSERDA goes and says we want to buy projects, and the various people who own sites can bid into that process to essentially sell the energy. And the developer figures out, well, should I interconnect on Long Island? Should I interconnect in New York City? Should I bring it directly to Westchester? They have to do that optimization, so we don't really control that. But what the thought here is that you get to a point where it becomes very expensive. Like the next cable in, you get a lot of curtailment. Curtailment, if I'm a project developer, means that the wind energy can be produced, but I can't sell it. And so that has a cost to customers, and so does unbundling it. But there's an economic relationship there where, if the facility can produce, you want to be able to accept the power if it's economically better to accept the power than to not accept the power. And the more power you have coming on the Long Island grid, the more curtailment you're going to get. The more curtailment you're going to get, the more you have basically a wasted resource. You put in all this fixed investment, but you can't accept the power. You're not getting the power. You need to get that same power from somewhere else. You need to build another resource somewhere else. So there's this grand optimization of the whole grid that essentially has to occur. It's not just how much offshore wind, but how much all that other stuff and how much transmission from upstate to downstate. But one final thought here is, why is this so important? If the state's going to try and hit a 2040 zero carbon electric grid goal, most of the state's renewable resources, large-scale renewable resources, are upstate. You have hydro, you have upstate wind, you have upstate solar. We have solar here on Long Island, but the land is much more constrained than some of the great green open spaces of upstate New York. But if you build something upstate, you then need to build transmission to bring it downstate, because most of the load is downstate. But here's this great resource in offshore wind that is located next to the load, and that's what makes it particularly valuable for the New York State electric grid. So.
I heard someone talking about that in a podcast yesterday.
Yes, for more, you can tune in to Newsday Live with Mark Harrington, Joy Brown, and Tom Falcone at a link near you.
If you need any help, we only have one trustee who's a member of the Actors Guild. He can provide any help.
That's true.
Make a
How'd I
cameo.
do? I don't know. It was a pretty amateurish performance, I think, but we got the message across.
Okay, thank you. Next item on the agenda is consideration of approval of the tariff changes you mentioned, presented by Tom again.
It's a busy day.
Oh, we have a comment?
Fred Harrison,
Yes, I think it's appropriate now for me to make comment, because usually after the report, we're allowed to make a statement, ask questions, and so on. Is this the time to do that?
That would be fine.
Sure, absolutely.
Yes, my name is Fred Harrison. I live in Merrick. I'm a ratepayer. I also volunteer with Food and Water Watch. I'd first like to extend my greetings to the new board members. I think, as you can see, there's lots of good work to be done here. I have a couple of questions and some short comments. My first question is related to a communication I sent to Mr. Falcone and the board concerning PSEG lobbying and whether or not it violated the OSA. I haven't heard a response to that question, and I was concerned that it be reviewed because I think it's rather important to make it very clear what is appropriate for PSEG spokespeople to be doing on ratepayer funding. And so that's a question I have. The second question relates to the OSA that was signed this past April because it was accompanied by a request from the board for there to be, I guess, what might be called options analysis 0.20 to be completed at the end of this year about what exactly should be recommended to the board in 2025. And I'd like an update, if there is one, on how that is proceeding. Now to my comments. As we know that PSEG should be finalizing their IRP fairly soon. And it's concerning to me, given their attitude towards public power, as evidenced by the comments of Mr. Hahn, it makes it very hard for me to imagine as a ratepayer that they can really be relied upon to chart the best course for ratepayers' future. It is concerning to me that we have to trust their judgment. The 2017 IRP was important indeed in charting the way forward with renewable power. But if one reads through the 2017 report, I think you will find zero mention of the potential for low-cost power supply alternatives facing ratepayers. Now, I think this matter in this upcoming 2022 IRP is very important, and I think, as you know, considering the termination of National Grid contracts. Now, I mention this because I'm concerned, as you are, with renewable power and decarbonization. And I think that we all can agree that the fastest, most effective route to decarbonization is cheap electrons. And to get those cheap electrons, we need to reduce all the possible costs we can. And if that includes management contracts, it includes management contracts. If it includes private power supply agreements with companies like National Grid, it may include that. I say this not to demonize PSEG, not to demonize National Grid, but to simply say, as a ratepayer who's facing costs of transitioning away from fossil fuels, we need cheap electricity. And I know that this board works very hard. I sit here at every meeting. You're looking for ways to reduce costs and to be effective. We need to go even further. We need to chart new territory. It's difficult new territory, but we need to chart new territory because we need that cheap power so my neighbors and your neighbors will willingly say, I want to switch to heat pumps. I want to move to EVs, and I'm not frightened of future power costs. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your comments. Always appreciate your educated opinion.
I'd be happy to address the comments. Mr. Harrison always has smart comments, pays a lot of attention, devotes a lot of time to us. So while we don't always take every question just to keep the board meeting moving, I'll just deal with it very quickly. PSEG lobbying, the resources that are paid for by LIPA, the resources that are devoted to us. We have reminded PSEG, that those resources are to be employed towards advancing the objectives of the board and not to be employed in that manner. They've assured us that that's the case. So they can use their own corporate resources, but the resources that are paid for by the board really should be devoted to the work of the board and not that work, unless that work is also furthering the work of the board. But in this case, the board has not taken a position on this, and that should not be where the resources are going. On the options analysis, the board did ask for analysis by the end of 2013 of what the alternatives are at the end of the contract in 2025. Obviously, there's also a legislative commission that is currently ongoing and expected to deliver a report sometime, I suppose, in April. I had said March, but March is almost over. But sometime soon, and they'll have their own view, and so we'll take that into account. Obviously, to the extent that the legislature and governor choose a path or recommend a pass or pass legislation, then we are a state entity and we'll follow the legislation. To the extent that they don't, then we will certainly have to run a procurement and think about other things. And so we're really at this point looking to see what the Legislative Commission does as opposed to our own process, because it may be short-circuited by whatever the legislature and the governor decide. On the IRP, I would simply say we're on low-cost power supply in general. We're very focused on areas that minimize costs for customers. I will say that LIPA had a pretty good role in actually getting the federal grants for public power, the cash grants that were just passed, a pretty good role in moving that along through our trade organizations. We developed those proposals. We weren't the only one. It's a coalition. But that had been a goal that we started more than 5 years ago, found the right vehicle, and that is now a benefit to all public power utilities and other not-for-profits. And so that is good, because so much of renewables are paid through the tax code. The tax code subsidizes about a third of the cost of renewables, but if you don't pay taxes, then you have to hire a third party to own it to monetize the tax credits for you, and there's a lot of leakage. You know, the federal government's paying for a third, but you're not getting that third. That other party is collecting some of that. So we thought that it would be more appropriate to have the option for the federal government to just cut nonprofits a check so that we run a level playing field. That said, we have used ownership in the past, including most recently in a battery storage RFP. And so where things look cheaper to us, we use the vehicles that would provide the least cost, balancing cost and risk. And so I don't think we'll go out and, for example, enter in the construction of offshore wind. It takes a very unique skill set, but for the right projects and the right facilities, it makes sense. Where someone brings scale economies or development knowledge or experience that the international companies that do this have, I think it'd be far better in that case in a contracting situation. So you have to look at the resource by resource. So.
Okay. Next item on the agenda.
I'm sorry, Trustee Fischel, there is one person in the waiting room with their hand raised to speak on this topic. Would it be okay to invite them in at this time?
Sure.
Thank you. Billy Roberti.
Hi, thank you for accepting my question and my input. First of all, I did attend the podcast that you were in, Tom, and I thought it was really good, and it only lasted half an hour. It was a great job. My concern is that I had an interesting experience on the 13th of this month where I got emails and texts, and my husband did too, saying our power was out. Now, I was at home. My power was fine, and I didn't understand why I was getting these messages. And then I found out hours later there was an accident about a mile away from my home. It took out an electric pole, and it took out some people's power. Now, given that I have a smart meter that is supposed to be super smart, and pretty much everyone in my area does have that, how could they not know that I still had power? It's a false positive to tell me that. Now, it was fine since I was at home. But if I had been at work in Manhattan and I had some concerns, I might be trying frantically to get home to take care of this issue. It could be winter and have to find some other way to heat the home, or have an invalid in the house. So I'm wondering, is anyone looking at the false positives where we're getting reports that power's out when it isn't the case? In other words, isn't there a more granular level that PSEG can use in their outage reporting system that gets down to circuits? If a circuit is down, if my circuit is down, definitely don't have power. And certainly with smart meters and all this technology, they should be able to be very granular in who has power and who doesn't. And that would also help in terms of repairs. So has anyone looked at this? And if not, I would like you to look at this other part of the outage reporting system. Thank you.
Thank you, Billy.
And we'll follow up. Thank you.
We will follow up. Okay. Anybody else in the waiting room, Bobby?
No, thank you.
Anybody else not signed up to speak who wants to speak?
Not at this time, best I can tell from the information I have.
Okay.
How's that for a lawyer answer?
So the next item on the agenda is the consideration of approval of tariff changes presented by LIPA CEO. Tom?
Great, thank you. So this is a topic that we've been discussing now for about 15 months, but for the benefit of those watching at home, we will talk a little more about it briefly, and just say that there is a website that has more detail, the actual technical proposal, fact sheets, videos. There's a lot of information available. But high level, right now, 98% of customers are on a flat rate. The proposal is that the new standard rate, when you call customers for electric service, the new standard rate instead be a two-period rate. There's one rate for, quote, peak, and another rate for off-peak. Peak is 3 to 7 p.m. on weekdays. Off-peak is the rest of the time. So 88% of the hours of the year are off-peak. So this would be the new standard when you call us for service, and also to transition customers beginning in 2024 and largely completing by mid-2025 if everything goes according to plan, transitioning customers to that new offering. That said, as I'll come back to in a minute, we're still giving customers choices. If you go to the next page, why is this beneficial? Well, when you break the day into two periods, about 80% of customers save a little bit of money. While you'll still cook dinner from 3 to 7 p.m. or use air conditioning from 3 to 7 p.m., most of your energy use is off-peak. And there's also now, so you roughly break even. You see that on the time of day rate. Typical average customer may save $3 a month. Not a ton, but what it shows is if you pay more for energy at peak and less for energy off-peak with typical usage, you about break even. But now you have the ability to save money if you can move usage. So if you pre-cool your home, meaning let's say you like your home at 72 degrees, instead you have it at 72 degrees most of the time, but at 2 p.m. you lower it to 70, at 3 p.m. you raise it to 74, and at 7 p.m. you lower it back to 72. You've got a programmable thermostat. You set it once, it might save you about $12 a month in the summer. Not huge, but it's your $12. Not too bad. Additionally, for customers who can really move load overnight, think of somebody like many of the people on this board who have an electric vehicle. They could save $40 a month, or if they choose an optional super off-peak rate, which is a very discounted rate on the overnight, they could save even $55, $56 a month. So as we have more people putting on, adding electric vehicles, if, solar installations now, about 10% of solar installations used to be about 0, but about 10% have battery storage associated with it. With the touch of a button, you can set the battery for your time of day rate. With the touch of a button, you can set your EV that you can plug it in at 5 p.m., but it'll charge after 10. So other options shown here. But the point is to show the customer the price, the peak and the off-peak, and let them make the choice. And this is not atypical. Customers are used to in other walks of life, for example, that if you want to buy an airplane ticket the day before Thanksgiving, it costs a lot more than the day of. Peak off-peak pricing is not atypical. And this is a very common thing that's done around the world. Some whole states have moved to time of day pricing. Lots of utilities offer voluntary time of day pricing. So this is a very established thing. I wouldn't say that we're on the bleeding edge here, but we're still ahead of most of the pack, and we would be the first utility in the state of New York to do this. If you go to the next page, this just shows, and there's two seasons. There's summer and non-summer. summer is June to September, and so we already have seasonal rates. So just focusing on this as an example, if you have a flat rate, summer rate, it's about 24 cents a kilowatt hour using, this is using 2023 budget data. In this new time of day rate, you would pay 40 cents or 39 cents from 3 to 7 p.m., but 20 cents the rest of the time. So you pay quite a bit more during the peak, but you pay 4 cents less during the off-peak. And since you use most of your energy off-peak, you actually save a little bit of money. If you go to the next page, same applies here, only this gives you the super off-peak, where you can spend 13 cents overnight and save, a lot of money to the extent you can move a load overnight, say an EV or something like that. Go to the next page. But you'll have options. So the new standard rate will be this 2-period rate. You'll have this 3-period super off-peak optional rate for the customers it works for. You can choose a flat rate if you like. And then there's some other rates for customers with special situations. But while this is our new standard rate, we're also offering a bill protection guarantee. So we want customers to try it. Most will benefit from it. So give it a try. If it turns out you're on the time of day rate and you would have saved more money on the flat rate, we'll send you a check, no questions asked, and say, do you want to opt out? So this would, if you go to the next page, let me finish one final thought. This would begin in 2024. The transition plan would likely take until 2025. It calls for moving customers in waves. And of course, in this case, the board is delegating to me and management here to ensure that the IT systems and billing systems and the customer experience is good. And so if it's not good, we're not going to move people. We're going to delay the waves. So we only move if it works. And because we don't want customers to have a bad experience, this is supposed to be a good experience. So the IT systems will be tested and they'll work, or we're not going to move. The customer communication plan will be adequate, or we're not going to move. If we move a wave of customers, we're going to do customer transaction surveys where we say, how was that experience? Anything we could improve? And we'll take that advice before we move the next wave of customers to ensure we have a positive experience. We've had a lot of coverage. We've been talking about this for the last 15 months, back to December 2021, when we had a proposal that was endorsed by NYSEA, and NYSEA, the Solar Energy Industry Association, this board, the DPS, that this is a good thing to do, that other states have done it, other utilities have done it. Good thing to do. We'll go first. And like I said, we worked on that proposal with other stakeholders for about a year. We released the draft proposal in December. We've been doing a lot of media, a lot of elected official meetings, websites, fact sheets, spent a good bit of time on it over that period. And if you go to the next page, did hold, here's just more media appearances and other things go on, did hold 2 public comment sessions. There were 13 comments from individuals that were filed. I won't read through all of them, but they're detailed in the board memo and addressed in the board memo. If we go to the next page. We also had comments from NYSEA, the Solar Energy Industry Association, and Edgewise Energy, a CDG fuel cell developer, and also echoed by one individual customer around net metering. The key issue is, if you go to the next page, the concern that some had was that when you move from a 1-period rate to a 2 or a 3-period rate, my solar system may overproduce in one period, underproduce in another period, and these are separate banks. So I could end up getting a bill that if I only had a 1-period rate, it would offset each other, right? Because what net metering is I deposit to the bank anytime and I withdraw from the bank anytime. What if I now have 2 banks, I may have, a surplus in the peak bank and a deficit in the off-peak bank, or vice versa. And so we've proposed, and NYSEA has indicated that this works for them, an exchange mechanism. And the idea here is, if someone really develops a large surplus in one bank but has a deficit in the other bank, they can exchange at the ratio between peak and off-peak, so that they don't develop a permanent surplus in the one bank. And then what that also does is it gives the incentive for the customer to stay on the rate rather than go to the flat rate, where they would only have one bank. We did look at the numbers on this, and it really does affect only about 6,000 customers. So it's not the common experience. It's not the most common experience even for a solar customer. But for those where it makes sense, then great. Happy to accommodate that. Next page. Next steps. So if the board takes it up and approves it today, you'll also recall that you approved the implementation plan guidelines in December, which is this 2023 performance metric PS&CE 8 transition to new standard time of day residential rates. And it calls for various milestones throughout the year. In the first quarter, it called for delivering a project implementation plan that includes all the key business technical requirements and information technology requirements. You also budgeted in the 2023 budget $4.8 million to complete the IT work this year. So that is already in progress. And by June 30th, it is a comprehensive customer and communications and marketing plan, engagement plan, a change management plan that are due. Each of these, like our normal process, gets submitted and then is subject to review and approval, markup, IV&V, and then we also verify that the work actually gets done. The material goes simultaneously to LIPA and DPS. In the fourth quarter, the IT work will be finished. If it isn't finished and doesn't meet the testing plans, then we won't be proceeding. But we've budgeted the funds, and the idea is that the work will be finished for us to offer the rate on an opt-in basis, and then for all new customers, January 1, and then start this transition plan. Obviously, like all your performance metrics, the board has requested quarterly reports on all of them, and this would be a key marquee item that will be updating you on progress throughout the year and readiness. And as I said, if we're not ready to go, we're not going to move customers for a lousy experience. If the call center isn't ready to go, if the billing systems aren't ready to go, those are all things that you're not going to move customers. I mean, that would be crazy, right? We want good, the goals here include good customer outcomes where people are satisfied with the rate. So that is the objective, a customer satisfaction objective, as well as providing this choice to customers, as well as the savings of both money and carbon. So this has been done by other utilities with high levels of customer satisfaction, low levels of opt-out, high customer participation, and there's no reason we can't do it as well. And so I believe that's the last page. I will say that we also have a presentation by Kerry Gallagher from the DPS on their work, and want to thank them for their partnership over the last 15 months in reviewing these materials. And I think she would like to say some words before the board takes up the next action.
Yes.
Welcome.
Thank you. And good afternoon, trustees, and a very warm welcome to our two new trustees. We look forward to working with you. I'm sparing you the PowerPoint today. Just a few very brief remarks. I did want to mention that I'm here today with members of the team from the New York State Department of Public Service Long Island office who've been working diligently on the review of this historic rate proposal. And I'd just like to have them all stand up there in the gallery. If you guys could just stand up, wave. So yeah, a lot of team members put in a lot of time and effort to review this rate proposal. Again, it's a very, very historic rate proposal. So, and for the benefit of the newest trustees, I just want to let you know, so the LIPA Reform Act of 2013 is what created the Long Island office. And the purpose, and I quote, is to review and make recommendations with respect to the operations and terms and conditions of service of and rates and budgets established by the Long Island Power Authority and or its service provider. So that is why we're here. That's why we send you these nice long recommendation letters every time you make proposals, and we take the job very seriously. So New York State has entertained and encouraged the development of time of day rates for decades. So I want to make it very clear, the department strongly supports LIPA's proposal to build a successful rate framework for the LIPA service territory. The department stands ready and willing to take the important lessons from other utilities around the country and partner with LIPA in making time of day rates successful for LIPA's customers in furtherance of the state's ambitious climate goals, because of course that's really the end goal here, right, is to achieve electrification, to decarbonize, to be fossil free. So, I used to be regional director at the Department of Environmental Conservation here on Long Island. And we had a saying there for Long Island. It happens here first, or it happens here worst. So any and all recommendations that we have proffered are with the goal of achieving the former outcome and not the latter. So working together, I believe that we, LIPA, PSCG Long Island, the Department of Public Service, all the external stakeholders you see here, that we can ensure successful transition to the first in the state time of day rates within the LIPA service territory. So again, we strongly support adoption of this tariff proposal, and we look forward to supporting you in this historic effort. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thanks for all your help in this endeavor. Trustees, any questions? Bobby, anybody signed up to speak on this?
Yes, I believe here in the room we have David Sharon. Yes, from Empower.
David? Just
and
you?
I have to say, I want to thank David for his partnership in this. David is not just a very prominent local business partner in the solar business, but also chair of NYSEA, and played a big role in bringing this initiative together back in December of 2021, and has been a great partner as we worked on it over the last 15 months, devoting a lot of time from him and his members to make this work. So I just want to acknowledge his particular leadership on this issue.
Thank you, Tom. Thanks, everyone. Pleasure to be here. I'll just acknowledge that it's been a pleasure to work with you and others at LIPA and PSCG Long Island to come up with this plan, and now we're working on implementation. Really impressed and grateful for the thoughtfulness by which everyone has approached this and incorporating all stakeholders and thinking about success for everyone. So it's really impressive, as a matter of fact. I'll share NYSEA. We support this initiative. We support time of day. I think it's really important we think about how do we achieve these climate goals, these very ambitious climate goals. The time of day plan incorporates a market force. It's using price signals that enable customers to respond, take action, either change their behavior, adopt solar, batteries, electric vehicles. I'll share an anecdote with you. Walking into the office early, just last week, customer of ours for 10 years, solar customer for 10 years, nearly tackled me. David, I just ordered my electric car. Tell me, I want to get a battery, I want to get an electric heat pump, and explain to me time of day rates. I said, Jim, you've made my week, my month, and I can't wait to share this anecdote. So I think it's really an exciting moment for folks to participate in this transition. And the other, just maybe a parting thought for today, I'm really excited to work on this sort of market force of price signals. Critical. We'll be partners in the implementation. I also want to just observe that the other component of this, we have the state goal, but also the proper pricing of externalities, both climate change and pollution. We have to get that right too, and I know we're all working on that initiative as well. So that's going to be sort of a parallel initiative. But for today, really grateful for the initiative, excited to be a good partner. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Yes, one
Anybody
more.
else in the waiting room?
Yep, Jonathan Cohen is in the waiting room.
Jonathan?
Jonathan, you're on mute. Oh, there we go.
There we go. Thanks, Bobby. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jonathan Cohen. I'm the policy director at the New York Solar Energy Industries Association. I'm also the chairman of the Long Island Solar and Storage Alliance. I'm probably going to end up yielding back some of my time today, but I just want to take a couple of minutes to echo David's comments and publicly thank LIPA staff for the really collaborative stakeholder process that they have led over the last 15 months. And in particular, I want to commend Tom Falcone, Justin Bell, and John Little. At the beginning of this process, the solar industry had a number of serious concerns about how these new rates would impact existing solar customers and the value proposition for Long Islanders who were looking to transition to solar energy. None of these concerns were simple, and there wasn't necessarily an obvious solution. And that said, LIPA promised to take our feedback seriously and to do everything possible to integrate our ideas, and LIPA kept that promise. Over the course of the stakeholder meetings that Tom and David mentioned, the LIPA team shared really valuable data with us. They responded quickly to our questions and concerns, and engaged with us to develop some really thoughtful and data-driven solutions. So, there's going to be some conversations about logistics that'll continue throughout the implementation phase. But I'm really excited to be able to report that because of LIPA's honest engagement and transparency, that the New York solar industry supports this proposal. We believe that it strikes the needed balance between the needs of the electric grid and the needs of Long Island ratepayers, and it acknowledges the imperative to accelerate clean energy adoption. In the coming months and years, New York is going to need to address the need for peak load management without stifling our ability to meet the state's really ambitious renewable energy goals. And doing that is going to require exactly the kind of genuine partnership between utilities and the renewable energy industries that was exemplified here. State agencies are watching, like Carrie said, and I'm confident that other utilities are going to replicate the model that we have demonstrated here. So I thank you wholeheartedly. And I look forward to continuing to work with LIPA on the implementation of this new rate design. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Bobby, anybody else in the waiting room?
No one else signed up.
I would like to thank Jonathan for the partnership as well. Countless hours, and I would be remiss to not thank Justin Bell and John Little. Justin recently departed us for my former firm to lead ESG investing for that firm, but a wonderful colleague for many years. We still keep closely in touch, and he really did a bang-up job here. And John Little, who's been on our staff for a very, very long period of time, and it's couldn't have gotten there without him. But also the great team at PSEG that is going to has worked on this to date and is going to work on these plans and this implementation along with LIPA, along with DPS, to make sure it's a success for our customers.
Thank you. Kudos to you and staff. Really well done. Bobby, anybody else in the waiting room?
No.
Okay, so I can finally say, do I have a motion for approval?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The motion carries. Thank you very much. Very exciting. Okay, the last item on the agenda is the consideration of the 22 financial report, be fully briefed and recommended by the F&A, which has been fully briefed and recommended to the F&A committee. This item will be presented by our controller, Donna Mongiardo. Donna?
Hi, thank you. Yes, we're recommending approval of our 2022 financial statement audit. It was conducted by KPMG, who provided us with an unmodified opinion today. They met with the F&A committee this morning. We did a summary review. We had a page turner yesterday with the F&A committee, and the F&A committee had the opportunity to meet in executive session with the F&A committee members. Unless there's any additional questions that you would like me to address, we're proposing approval of the 2022 audited financial statements.
Trustees, any questions? Bobby, any public comments on this?
No.
Okay, do I have a motion for approval?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any abstention or opposition? Okay, the motion carries. Thank you. Bobby, has anybody signed up to speak?
There is one other person in the waiting room who has not raised their hand. If you would like to speak at this time, please do raise your hand. Everyone else in the room has already spoken. Occasionally, people end up in the waiting room by accident.
Okay. Okay, I'll note that the Secretary's report on board policies and communication was provided to the trustees as a written submission. Okay, lastly, at the request of our General Counsel, in accordance with state legislation governing communications during pending procurements, I'd like to request that members of the public refrain from making endorsements or lobbying or using against any specific projects whose proposals are pending in an active procurement process. This concludes the board's regular agenda for today. The next scheduled convening of the board will be May 10th, 2023. I will now make a motion to return to executive session to discuss litigation matters. I note that no votes will be taken and we will not be returning to open session. Do I have a second?
Second.
So moved. We are adjourned, everybody. Thank you.